a MIDI controller to anything within Volta. And this is particularly useful if you want to potentially add more like a VJ setup. So of course, typically with Volta, if you're DJing or producing, you might use your Ableton stems to control various things in Volta. You might link it to say Tractor or DJM, such that every time you change, the highs, something was to happen in your world. But if you want to separate that responsibility between the DJ and let's say the VJ, or you just want to be able to have granular control over what's happening in Volta using a MIDI pad, I'm going to show you how to do just that. And it could be any MIDI controller, everything from an actual DJ controller like the Tractor S4 through to what I have here is an Akai. Really anything that has any MIDI outs is all you need to get going. So I'm going to go and pick a world, and I'm just going to pick one of the new ones within Volta. This one's from called Endless rather, which we used at Glastonbury. A little trick, sometimes when you open a world in Volta, just whilst it's in beta, the camera angling might be off. So I just have to zoom out just here. A trick, you can go perform, pick a camera, enable it, and that'll keep the camera locked in whatever you're doing. It's just an easy way to make sure what you have centered on the screen is what goes on. So I sort of have these this audio frequency visualizer that's spinning around. And the first thing I'm going to show you how to do is to add a macro effect, a big sort of effect that can be used during a build, let's say. And I'm going to map that to one of my sliders on my Akai. So if I go to Global Effects and Edit, I'm going to add, at the first instance, the glitch effect. And if it's already loaded over here. So currently it's linked to my lows, but I'm going to override this. If I click on None, and if I just click Shift and then click on the glitch effect slider, and now all I'm going to do is essentially move my slider. So shift click on the slider, and that's now adding, if you can see that sort of wobble effect, that's now adding that wobble effect. If I wanted to make it a bit more elaborate and kind of obvious, if I click on this drop down setting, I can control the input and the output. For when you're MIDI mapping, don't worry so much about the minimum. These are essentially corresponding to the actual keys within the channel bands within the MIDI range. But my output is what's going to change the effect. So I want to move this up to say 0.4, so it's a bigger output. And now you can really see it sort of stretching to its max. I might, for example, want to map my hues. So if I shift click on my hue up here and then map it to another slider, I now have the ability to change the hues with one of my sliders, and I can obviously do those in combination. I could, for example, also change my, let's add my saturation for argument's sake. So shift click, third slider, and now my saturation is changing around. So a bit more monochrome, and now I've got full sat, and here's my hues. So I can obviously do this live. I could also keep it linked to audio and have a combination of both. The next thing I'm going to do to show you, which is quite powerful, is how I can toggle elements on or off using a MIDI pad. So here's probably where I'd use my MIDI buttons as opposed to my sliders. And this means that when a world is coming on, I can toggle these various elements on or off. So to show you an example, if I go to my audio frequency visualizer, the spiral effect, this one's a little bit more fiddly. Just to give a heads up, the sliders are just a shift click. When it's a button, you'll have to actually manually do it yourself. So the easiest way, let's say I want to map this one to button number 1, I'll just click it beforehand, click on the link icon, MIDI, I've only got channel 2, that's what it's recognized as coming out from my Akai, click on note, and then if I tap on that button, you can see 81 is illuminating in yellow. So I'm just going to hit that, it's now mapped, and now if I push the button, the frequency goes. If I tap it again, it reappears. So I'm just going to do the same thing to my aura cell and map it to number 2. That's these kind of golden lines coming from it. If I hit MIDI, channel 2, note, let me just check what it is. It's number 74. So I'm going to map both of these aura cells to 74. And now you can see the vast difference. So I could cut everything, add a little bit of glitch effect, add a little bit of this sort of chromatic kind of feel to it. And as the track is developing and as things are happening, I could then look to, let's say, add some warp in there. And you can see that sort of effect. So now I've just added in those aura cells. I'm going to calm down the glitch to make things more obvious. And say I'm happy, the track's now dropped. I'm now going to launch in my visualizer. And potentially pull down the hues, move it back into sort of this chromatic effect. One last thing I'll show you that's become quite interesting, that we actually did quite a lot of at Amnesia in Ibiza on July 29th, is also you can even map your camera angles to the sliders. So if I go back to perform and click on camera, again, I can map any of these sliders, anything with a link icon to anything MIDI. So if I shift click on my field of view and map it to channel my 5th slider, now I'm going to get the zoom effect. So I can zoom in, I can zoom out. And of course, you can see how this becomes very powerful if we're trying to get some momentum and motion in there. And we can zoom back in, we can zoom back out. Quite an interesting effect as well as also linking this to sound, let's say. So I could also change that from MIDI and move it to, let's say, the lows of my voice. So now as I'm speaking, you're getting this kind of warp-like effect. But there you have it. This is a way where we can now control this glitch effect, my hues rather, contrast, sats, and my field of view. I can toggle on, toggle off, toggle on, toggle off.